ngon. Ngon ngon. Ngon ngon. Dạ. 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 Dạ.
are lining up to take part in Guinea's national census. Local authorities and census staff are conducting biometric enrollments, including iris scans and fingerprinting to issue identity receipts. Those will be converted into voter cards ahead of elections, which the Prime Minister of the junta-ruled nation announced on Monday would take place in December. Prime Minister Amadou Uriba's announcement comes a month after the government set September 21st as the date for a constitutional referendum, which authorities have said would be a precursor to any election and a return to constitutional rule. Guinea is ruled by military leader Mamadi Doumbouya, who seized power in a coup in September 2021, and in 2022 proposed a 2-year transition to elections, but then did not take steps to organize a vote. The junta later set and missed a deadline of December 31st, 2024 for a return to civilian administration. In July 2024, the junta presented a draft of a new constitution, which may allow Doumbouya to participate in the next presidential election. Guinea's 2 former ruling parties are currently suspended. The other major opposition party, the Union of Democratic Forces of Guinea, has been placed under surveillance.
Back to Britain now, and the Labour government.
These residents in
our cheesiest idol ever!
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has pleaded with member countries to pay their shares to help the world body's peacekeeping operational. The United Nations has been scrambling to respond to funding calls for aid operations from its biggest donors, the United States, under President Donald Trump's administration.
Dear Minister, peace operations can only succeed when backed by robust mandates and clear, predictable and sustained contributions, both financial and logistical. But these are tough times for the financing of our work across the board. Peacekeeping is no exception. It is crucial that we are able to use the increasingly limited resources we have and use them well. And this requires more flexible rules and processes.
Guterres argued that with the budget representing a tiny fraction of global military spending, around 0.5%, UN peacekeeping remains one of the most effective and cost-effective tools to build international peace and security. Unfortunately, peacekeeping operations have been facing serious liquidity problems. It is absolutely essential that all member states respect their financial obligations, paying their contributions in full and on time. The UN's peacekeeping department currently leads 11 operations in countries including Congo, the Central African Republic, South Sudan, Lebanon, Cyprus, and Kosovo.
Hi, welcome back to Local Election Matters.
1, 2, 3, reform!
In the last episode, we looked at 4 challenges Reform face, even if they make big gains in this May's local elections and the parliamentary by-election. That's important for understanding if Reform could be on track for an even bigger national breakthrough. In this episode, we're looking at the other political parties. What are their big challenges? And what will these elections tell us about them? First, let's take a look at the huge challenges the Conservatives face. Most voters in the last election just simply wanted to get the Tories out of government. Will these local elections then show that the new leader, Kemi Badenoch, can begin to turn things around? The Conservatives face a major split on the right with the rise of Reform UK. Now, these elections will likely show that's continuing. It could even be getting a bit worse for the Tories. The local election results will be tough for the Conservatives. Let's look again at the following chart, which shows how the parties did in the same places last time when they were held in 2021. And you can see their vote shares in the local elections in the dots here, and this is their polling showing the Conservatives losing all of that support. The general election, they increase a little bit and go down again. So the last time these local elections were held, they did very well, but now we can expect significant losses for the Conservatives. But as I explained in episode 1, the results could just be then the local elections catching up with last year's general election. The key question is, have things changed? Could they be a bit worse? And what signal does that send for the Conservatives' chances of recovering from that massive election defeat last July? Now, losses in these local elections could give them worse news because they face growing threats from the Liberal Democrats on the one side and from Reform UK on the other. And those parties are likely to do well in May. Conservative problems can be summarised this way. These are the constituencies, the parliamentary constituencies from 2024, with the Labour Party in red in second place, or the Liberal Democrats in yellow, or Reform in teal, the parties that are behind them in those Conservative constituencies ranked by the affluence of the constituency. Now, these are general election patterns, but we'd expect the same kind of dynamic in the local elections in May. Reform are in contention across those types of constituency, doing a bit better in those areas that are fairly deprived. But the Liberal Democrats, they're in contention in some of the Conservatives' most affluent seats. So in the locals, we'll expect Liberal Democrat gains in more affluent areas, and Reform UK to pretty much be doing better across the board. If that continues, the Conservatives will do even worse. Finally, for Kemi Badenoch, she just hasn't seen very much improvement in her party's polling since she became leader. If anything, things have got a bit worse for her. While these local elections are fought partly on local issues, they also reflect people thinking about whether they can yet consider voting for the Conservatives in any type of election. And you can see here that Kemi Badenoch can take little comfort from her leader ratings. This shows the average favourability of the 4 party leaders here in the 5 months leading up to these local elections. Kemi Badenoch there is significantly behind Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, and Nigel Farage, of course, the leader of Reform UK. It's been going in the wrong direction for her lately. The only news that has given her any real comfort is that Labour are now a bit less trusted on the economy. Let's look at what these local elections may mean for Labour. As we saw at the beginning, Labour had relatively bad local election results in 2021, so that means they're unlikely to suffer the same kinds of losses this time around. The Reform, they are set to challenge Labour both in the local elections and in the Runcorn and Helsby by-election, and for example in the Lincolnshire and Hull Metro mayor elections. They want to show that they can win contests against Labour, not just taking votes from the Conservatives as they did last year, pretty much in July. Labour is going into these elections when people remain very worried about their financial circumstances, and that's happening under this government now, and that's a major risk for Labour. You can see here that Labour is losing support more amongst those people who feel more economically insecure. These are the proportions switching away from Labour between July and October last year. And that switching is greater amongst those people who felt more economically insecure. The challenge for Labour is that those feelings of economic insecurity, they are higher among the very voters who consider voting for the Greens, the Liberal Democrats or Reform UK. The line here represents average feelings of economic insecurity by age. And you can see here it really peaks between the ages around 35 and 59. Now that arises through a combination of low savings, bad types of debt, higher outgoings and less disposable income. They're also the people, in our analysis, the very people who are switching away from Labour in higher numbers. They're today's swing voters, and they will matter in these local elections. As we saw in the first episode, the Liberal Democrats tend to enjoy more success in local elections than they do in general elections. That's one reason we just need to be careful in assuming that patterns in these local elections will be repeated in a forthcoming general election in the future. You can see here, in the bold line, the vote shares the Liberal Democrats have got in local elections, and in the dotted line, the shares they've got in the subsequent general election. Across all of these local elections, the Liberal Democrats have done better in the local elections. Now let's look at whether that's true also for the Green Party. And we can see so too. Their vote shares in the local elections tend to always be higher than their vote shares in the subsequent general elections. So, success in these local elections in May will of course be a good local base for those smaller parties, but they still face huge challenges then in a general election. Their hope then is to convince people to vote for them tactically, where they have the best chance of beating a party more unpopular with voters. That's how they did well in July last year. But of course, that depends just as much on how unpopular or popular the largest parties are, as well as how people feel about the Lib Dems and the Greens. This May's local elections, the Metro Mayor elections and the Runcorn and Howsby by-election, they may confirm the things we pretty much already knew about the parties as of July last year. But they may show that the fracturing of our party system, the increasing support for smaller parties can challenge the big two, like Reform UK, are still on the rise even more, and then likely to be even more important in British elections in the years to come. Thank you for watching our local election series. I'll be back after May the 1st to analyse the results and figure out what they mean and how these local elections matter.
This is how we made our work flow better than ever.
Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has declared victory in the country's general election, seen as one of the most consequential in its history. After his win, Mark Carney addressed directly what many Canadians see as an almost existential threat posed by their North American neighbour. First, though, here's the moment that the Liberals realised their party had won the election. The Liberal Party were well behind in the polls just 3 months ago, but that was before Carney replaced Justin Trudeau as leader and US President Donald Trump upended relations and became the defining issue of the campaign. So here's Mr. Carney's victory speech, in which he directly addresses what he calls America's betrayal.
As I've been warning for months, America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen. But we also must recognize the reality that our world has fundamentally changed. As I stand before you this evening, humility, no matter how you voted, I will always do my best to represent everyone who calls Canada home.
Now, although Mark Carney's Liberal Party have won, it still remains too close to call whether he'll secure a majority in Parliament. If not, he'll have to rely on other parties to govern. In his concession speech, the leader of the opposition Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, congratulated Mr. Carney, but also made clear that he wouldn't abandon his electoral base.
Welcome to Red Ribbon, home of the best birthdays.
We hear your stories. We will carry those stories with us into Parliament. We will not forget the people for whom we work and for whom we fight every day. Now, I know that some of you might be disappointed that change did not get over the finish line tonight. Change takes time. Most of all, it requires that we never give up, because our people and our country are worth fighting for.
Well, our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, is in Ottawa, and she gave us a sense of what was happening.
What an extraordinary moment in Canadian political history. The Liberal Party, which only months ago was trailing in the polls by double digits, led by a Prime Minister, a former banker who until months ago had no political experience, has surged ahead in these polls, winning the Liberals a fourth year in office, and Mark Carney the mandate to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. And what unthinkable turnaround. And it is a measure of this moment, an election where the person whose name wasn't on the ballot, President Donald Trump, transformed Canada's political landscape. Not just the swinging tariffs he's imposed, but also the continuing threat to turn Canada into the 51st state has galvanized Canadians, have caused some Canadians to change their usual voting loyalties in order to put in charge of this country a 60-year-old economist and former banker who they believe is the man to solve the crisis of their lifetime. That's how Mark Carney put it. In his victory speech, while he thanked all of his supporters, he also mentioned several times that he would be the Prime Minister for all Canadians, recognizing that there were millions who didn't vote for him. His main challenger, Pierre Poilievre of the Conservatives, still did extraordinarily well in this poll, still got a very high percentage of the popular vote. Mark Carney knows that that is going to be something he's going to have to contend with. So he mentioned this. And he also mentioned, of course, repeatedly, the need to take on that threat from across the border. But he will have to deal with the problems from within as well. So he may soon find out that while he set himself up as a problem solver, that the problems and crises confronting a banker are of a totally different order in many ways than those confronting a prime minister who has to be accountable to the people and to a country which has its own internal barriers to trade and its own long-standing regional tensions, which at times have threatened to pull this country apart.
Lise Doucette there in Ottawa. Let's pick up on some of what Lise was saying there with Dr. Graham Young, Head of Social and Public Policy at the University of Glasgow. And Dr. Young, you're also an expert in Canadian politics. What a difference 3 months make. How much of this do you think, is it the Carney effect, replacing Justin Trudeau, or how much is it Donald Trump? Can you even quantify it?
So I think that's difficult to quantify. I think that this election was very much looking like it was going to be about cost of living, about the cost of housing, about grocery bills being high, all of these things that we are seeing across the rich world at the moment. Donald Trump came in and Donald Trump changed that. As you said, Donald Trump started making threats to Canada's sovereignty. Canada has, of course, entered a trade war against Donald Trump, or against the United States. And Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister, have become very unpopular and has stepped down. Basically, what we have seen in this election is the most dramatic swing in modern Canadian political history. The Liberal Party was 24 points down just a few months ago, and a few weeks ago they were about 6 or 7 points up. It looks like with the election they're about 2 points up now, and we're just waiting to see if they will be able to form a majority government or have another minority.
So if they don't secure enough to form a majority government, what happens? Which parties do they have to rely on?
So they'll have to rely on the New Democratic Party, the NDP, which is the third largest party in Canada, our Social Democratic Party. The last government the Liberals had under Justin Trudeau, they had an agreement with the New Democratic Party where they relied on the New Democratic Party for votes. The New Democratic Party used that to get through legislation on pharmacare, so prescription drugs, and on dental care. The New Democratic Party's argument throughout this election has essentially been, you want us in the room to get similar progressive policies in the future. The New Democratic Party has seen a very large share of their voters move to the Liberal Party to try to keep out Poilievre and to try to keep out the Conservative Party. So their bargaining power is significantly less than it used to be. But the Liberals still need 4 more seats to get to a majority, and the NDP have 7, so they do hold the cards here.
Is it the end of the NDP? Arguably, we saw its leader announce that he will be standing down, Jagmeet Singh, saying in a quite an emotional speech that he'll be standing down. Is that it for them?
Well, you never know what happens in politics, and I think in Canada we've really seen that in the last few months. I think the NDP certainly does need to go in a new direction. Their message was certainly not resonating with voters this time around, it seemed. However, this election was so exceptional with Donald Trump, with the threat posed by the United States, and with what a lot of NDP voters saw as the threats posed by the Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre. If those factors are taken out, then they might be able to rebound, but they probably do need to improve their messaging as well.
And those initial concerns that Mark Carney hadn't been elected, obviously he was elected as the Liberal leader, but he hadn't won a public election. All of that goes away now, given this remarkable victory.
It does, certainly. I think that actually played into his favor a bit. He essentially pitched himself as a man for crisis, someone who helped Canada through the global financial crisis, someone who helped the UK through Brexit. Basically, his argument was, I can solve these problems. I may not be an elected politician. My opponent has spent his life in politics. He doesn't know how to solve these. So I think he got a lot of credit to be able to do that. And if he did have...
Looking for great hotel prices? Plan your perfect stay with Agoda. Cozy, fancy, or budget friendly. And
The South African government and refugee advocates are rebuking the Trump administration for welcoming 59 white South Africans as refugees. The president told reporters Monday he admitted the refugees because of the, quote, genocide that's taking place. South Africa recently passed a new expropriation act which aims to address historical land injustices established during apartheid. Now, South Africa's government strongly disputes Trump's characterizations, saying there is no persecution of white Afrikaners in his country. Let's bring in Professor Ruth Hall from the University of Western Cape in South Africa for more on this. Professor Hall, Thanks for joining us. Can you just start by explaining the Expropriation Act, what it does, and why it's so controversial?
Thanks, Diane. So the Expropriation Act in South Africa has been long in coming. It's provided for in the Constitution, and it's been nearly 30 years of drafting this law. It does not provide for confiscation of land. What it does is it allows for a legal process reviewable by courts by which the state may compulsorily acquire property for certain purposes, including to restore that property to people from whom it was unfairly and unjustly taken in the past. In fact, it's the right of eminent domain. It's the same right that's enshrined in the American Constitution in the Fifth Amendment. In fact, it's quite a standard practice around the world that states have a right of eminent domain. What's striking here is that a legal process and a democratic state has established this right in law in South Africa. It is comparable to similar legislation around the world, and it has not yet been used. So it's entirely incorrect when President Trump characterizes this as a process of stealing land from white people or confiscating land. So there's a serious problem of misrepresentation of what the law is actually for. And I think that this has fed into a response in which an attempt to start to take steps towards redressing racial inequality from colonialism and from apartheid is seen as unfair discrimination. This is a narrative that has been promoted around this issue.
You say the law mostly clarifies powers the government already had for decades. What do you mean by that?
So the Constitution that was adopted in the Mandela years in 1996 said that the state must redistribute land and restore it to black South Africans who were unfairly dispossessed during apartheid. That process has been very slow, and up to now, the South African government has gone to landowners and offered to buy out property at market prices, even though the Constitution clarified that it could expropriate where needed. This current new law says that where it is unable to acquire land through other means, the state may take the property in question, a claimed farm, for instance, or a portion of a farm, and if the owner is not willing to sell at market price, it may expropriate that. And it should pay compensation that a court deems is just and fair, which may or may not be at market price. So it is taking a constitutional right and it's operationalizing it in law. And what this means is that in the future, the state could choose to depart from the norm of paying market level compensation. It hasn't happened yet. And in fact, most commentators, including my own institute, which has been following this for 30 years, have severe doubts as to whether the South African government has any intention to actually implement this law. So far, it is a law that is required by our constitution, but it has been equated, I think, in the public mind in parts of the West and among some of the white supremacist groups globally. It has been equated with the Zimbabwean land reform, in which white farmers were kicked off their land without compensation or without any kind of legal process. So, in my mind, this is a lot of smoke around something which has not happened.
So why do we now have these dozens coming over here claiming to be refugees? President Trump is calling this process racial persecution. He also says there's race-based genocide in South Africa because of this law. What's your response to that?
It's entirely fallacious. There is no data to back up the claim that there is a white genocide underway in South Africa. Last year, in the first 9 months, there were 19,000 murders, of which only 50 took place on farms, and most of the data shows that less than 10% of the murders on farms were of white landowners. The vast majority of those murders were of poor black farm workers. So, there is this narrative. It's not the first time it has been promoted. South African right-wing organizations are very well networked with similar organizations in the US, in Australia, in parts of Europe, and have promoted this idea that white Afrikaners are subject to persecution. As you can see from the images scrolling right now, these are people who are mostly middle class or lower middle class, who have not had their lives directly threatened. It's in many senses, what is happening here is an existing privileged group within South Africa is claiming a need for asylum status in the US. It's become the laughingstock of South Africa. Online memes are going mad about it. You know, South Africa is actually the most unequal society in the world, in which the vast majority of the poor who suffer the most violence are black. And so what is being done here is so at odds with reality on the ground. What some observers in South Africa have said is that this has got to do actually with other things. It's got to do with geopolitics. It's got to do with South Africa's role in the BRICS and in the International Court of Justice case on Gaza. And it has to do with the performance of the US, which has closed its borders to many people who are facing violent persecution in their home countries, wars, and so on, and instead privileging a small group of relatively well-off white people from South Africa who are arguing that any move towards transformation constitutes discrimination. So it's most unfortunate. It's making South Africa look bad. But also, I have to say, many South Africans say if they don't want to be part of a racially integrated society, let them go.
All right, Professor Ruth Hall, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
This incredible mold remover gel can restore your bathroom and tiles to their original shine.
Well, for former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has gained the mayorship of a family stronghold as per initial results. Duterte currently detained at the International Criminal Court in The Hague for alleged crimes against humanity. The midterm results may shake President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s hold on the Senate. With over 60% of returns in, Duterte had built an insurmountable lead of 405,000 votes to 49,000 for his nearest competitor in Davao City. His daughter, impeached Vice President Sara Duterte, told reporters that plans were already underway to ensure he would officially become mayor. The 80-year-old was arrested at Manila's International Airport on March 11th and flown to The Hague the same day to face charges tied to his crackdown on drugs that killed thousands. Now, there is precedent for governing from a prison cell in the Philippines, with former Senator Leila de Lima jailed by Duterte on what rights groups say were trumped up drug charges. It seemed to be turning out a good election for the Duterte family. Duterte's youngest son, Sebastian, was elected for city's vice mayorship, which means he can discharge his father's duties in his absence. Another Duterte son, Paulo, was re-elected as congressman, while his grandchildren won local posts. The fate of his daughter, Vice President Sara Duterte, who is facing an impeachment trial, remains in the balance. The popular vice president, who is widely expected to run for president in 2028, is facing the prospect of a ban from politics should a jury made up of senators vote to impeach her. The 12 senators to be chosen during these elections will form part of the jury. Now, many people had expected Marcos Jr. picks to win most of the 12 seats, but according to the latest count of 80% of votes, only 6 from his camp appear to have won seats. Only 6 from his camp appear to have won seats.
Growing your dream business and selling products that are loved doesn't have to be a struggle with the right tool like Odoo. Integration of your end.
China is brushing off reports that it is interfering with the Philippines' midterm elections. In a regular press briefing on Thursday, April 24, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun was asked about the National Security Council's remark that it observed indicators proving Beijing's interference in the Philippines' upcoming midterm polls. In response, Guo says China follows the principle of non-interference in other countries' domestic affairs. He says China has no interest in interfering in Philippine elections. Earlier Thursday, National Security Council Assistant Director General Jonathan Malaya said during a Senate hearing that there were indications of Chinese state-sponsored groups in the Philippines interfering in the May 2025 polls. Senator Francis Tolentino asked him if China has ongoing operations to support candidates that they want to win and control candidates whom they do not prefer. Malaya answered in the affirmative. Apart from this, Tolentino bared the Chinese embassy in Manila's alleged troll farm, seeking to discredit the Philippine government and anti-China Filipino personalities. Tolentino said China supposedly paid for keyboard warriors under a contract with a private company called Infinitus Marketing Solutions Incorporated. Warriors under a contract with a private company called Infinitus Marketing Solutions Incorporated.
This is fried chicken. And here's one from Food.
The relationship that we have between Australia and China is our most important trading relationship.
But you know what's more important? The relationship between our people.
It's election time. Politicians are trying to win votes from every corner of Australia. And this year, the Chinese community is getting renewed attention.
Chinese Australian community is something to celebrate every single day of the year.
Those from migrant communities, but particularly from the Chinese backgrounds who want to work hard, who are small business people, who want to keep more of what they earn, they are the values of the Liberal Party.
As Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton fight to become Prime Minister, all eyes are on two key electorates, Menzies and Chisholm. So why are they so important? What issues will sway the election? And are Chinese Australians convinced politicians genuinely care about their community or just their votes? Chinese Australians played a key role in the last election. The swing against the Liberal Party was notably large in electorates with a high concentration of Chinese Australian voters. In the top 15 seats by Chinese ancestry, the swing was 6.6% compared to 3.7% in other seats. The seats of Menzies and Chisholm have the highest percentage of Chinese Australian voters of any electorates in Australia, and they are crucial electoral battlegrounds. Linda Bakassi has lived in Box Hill South for 5 years, but the mother of two is concerned about the rising costs of childcare and everyday essentials.
Everything's just so expensive now, so think about my children a lot as well, whether they're going to survive in the future if this cost of living crisis isn't sorted out. In terms of the childcare, like not only the cost, it's also the quality of the childcare. It's already very expensive.
Linda's view is far from unique, and these concerns will likely determine how people vote on election day.
Oh my god, it's so expensive. I can't afford this one. We're not really poor, but we feel poorer.
这种家庭，这个工作时间都要去延长。
房子的价钱，就下一辈基本上很难买得起房子。
When we talk about Chinese Australians, it's important to remember it is not a unified group. They come from different parts of the world, speaking various dialects, and have very unique immigration stories. Their views and their votes are just as diverse. There's a Chinese proverb, shop around before making decisions. That's how many Chinese Australians approach politics, carefully considering the options instead of pledging loyalty to just one party.
我觉得华人社区关心的问题和其他的社区并没有很大的不同。生活成本的问题、孩子上学的问题、住房的问题、医疗的问题、Medicare 的问题、养老的问题，我觉得他们很多的大陆来的移民，很多的华人移民都是第一代移民。第一代移民一个很普遍的问题，都是他们很关心澳洲和自己祖籍国的关系。
For Chinese Australian voters, the relationship with China is almost always on their minds. What's a particular challenge is that they're not willing necessarily to take the parties on face value. They're not being told how to vote by their parents. I think it is really important to remember how willing Chinese Australian voters are to punish candidates and governments that they don't feel are talking to them.
这个媒体9号的7号的。
Ray Gu, who arrived from China more than 30 years ago, shares a similar sentiment.
中国有句哲学语言是很好，叫做和而不同。你政界观念不同，不影响你做贸易，对吧？你不要为了这个政界的看法不一样，把贸易大门给关掉。
Many others we spoke to shared similar views.
您觉得澳中关系是一个非常重要的话题吗？对您来说？
当然了，没有中国的支持，澳洲早就要倒下去了。
所以现在中美关系反正现在是一个很暧昧的状态，澳洲很明显是也在观望着他们的，所以他们应该会考虑会对中国人就是会更多的去靠拢他们。
Candidates from both electorates are pulling out all stops to connect with the local Chinese Australian communities. They're hosting public events like this.
We have restored dialogue.
Handing out translated pamphlets and even taking conversations online. Some are on Chinese social media platforms despite the risk of censorship. It's all part of the race to win votes.
为了这次大选，在处理对华关系的时候都非常小心地谈论这个话题。我觉得澳大利亚的对华关系一直都是华人，说的是华裔选民关系问题。但相对来说，今年可能会2022年稍微好一些。
There's another important shift in this election, and that is the boundaries of these two key electorates have been redrawn. As a result, some voters are now part of a different electorate, which could have a significant impact on the election results. Liberal MP Keith Wallaham won the seat of Menzies with the mere 0.7% margin at the 2022 election. A redistribution in electoral boundaries has given the Labour Party a better chance to win, now contested by Labour's candidate Gabrielle Ng. It is no surprise then the Liberals will attempt to reclaim the neighbouring electorates of Chisholm, which they lost to Labour's Karina Garland at the last election.
They want to see a strong leader who's also compassionate and someone who cares, but they want to be able to be sure that when someone says they're going to do it, that that's what they will do.
According to the ABC election analyst Anthony Green, the redistribution improves Liberals' chance of defeating Labour's MP Karina Garland, who holds the seat by a margin of 6.4%.
If the analysts were all correct last time, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you as the member for Chisholm. Yet here we are. So all I can do is work as hard as I can, not take a vote, not take a moment for granted.
With redrawn boundaries and the power of Chinese Australian voters, the battle for Menzies and Chisholm could be key in deciding who forms Australia's next government.
宝。